The Nigerian Delta in West Africa, where the great river Niger fans out into the Atlantic. It's Sunday in Kagberedere, and church is in full swing. Nigeria's vast oil industry is based here. Now, it's under siege from the ordinary people of the Delta, who say they produce Nigeria's wealth but get nothing in return. Shell Oil, known here as SPDC, pumps the bulk of Nigerian oil in a joint venture with the government through over 1,000 wellheads and flow stations. But in Port Harcourt, there is little evidence of a booming oil town. Electricity and local amenities are a luxury few can afford. And thanks to massive government corruption, petrol refineries stand empty. Tankers wait weeks for imported fuel. The queues outside petrol stations can be kilometers long. Even worse, each day the military descends on petrol stations. Cars can enter only once a bribe has changed hands. Those who can't or won't pay are forcefully sent on their way. Leader Mite led a campaign with Ken Sarawiwa against Shell Oil in Ogoniland. Sarawiwa and 9 others were executed after a flawed trial. Mite still holds Shell partly responsible for the military crackdown which led to the executions.
They clearly were bringing some subtle blackmail against the government. Look, we control about 50% of the oil, and if we don't have a free environment to exploit that resource, it has a devastating effect on the economy. If you have such a situation in a government that is dependent on only that sole commodity, then you can understand control of political power is almost control of oil resources.
Oil brings in 80% of earnings, but Shell says that doesn't allow it to meddle in government.
The reality is that we're just a company. We are not a parallel government, and the government of Nigeria is government of a sovereign country. Shell has only limited access or leverage with government, and that leverage comes from our being a good corporate citizen.
Today, Shell's oil pipes still crisscross Ogoniland, through front yards and across their fields. Shell says they won't go back to Ogoni unless they're invited, but for now that's unlikely. Behind this wall in Ebubu hides a 30-year-old oil spill. Sarawiwa used it as a symbol of Shell's lack of care for the environment. Today, they're still waiting for the company to come and clean it.
The only reaction of Shell was to put a wall around the place to prevent access to this place. And in fact, soldiers were guarding here until recently. It shows clearly that nothing has changed in spite of the international outrage that followed the execution of Ken and the others, and the activities of Shell that were brought to the attention of the world.
Shell bought the land for $850, and it blames the Ogoni for delays in mounting a cleanup.
You are dealing with several communities, each of whom have a different set of questions and concerns. We have come through that process almost to the point where we could have awarded the job of remediation only for the unfortunate break in our relationship with the Ogonis in 1993-94.
Factionalism divides the Delta's people, but spurred on by the Ogoni campaign, other tribes have now begun to challenge Shell. These are the Ijaw.
You need infrastructural development, sustainable manpower development, and sustainable infrastructural development. Since the laws cannot enable us to control our resources ourselves.
The issue here in Nigeria is tribal. We see ourselves as minority. You cannot, if you're a minority, you cannot change the decisions of a majority. So it's only the oil companies that we believe can change these things.
In the Delta, it's young men, they call them the youths, who are encouraging the communities to ask for a greater share of the oil. Aloibri is the site of Shell's first Nigerian oil well, sunk in the 1950s. For now, Shell's not drilling here, but they still keep the land. The village chiefs complain they're not paid properly. Their current contract with Shell pays about $4 a hectare per year.
This is the document to prove that this is my well. This is well 12. The agreement of that particular oil field is 99 years. That is the first agreement. You know, our people were so blind. They were not learned. And if I say, anytime they want to pay and I say I will not sign, the next day if I go, I see someone else signed and collected the money.
The villages that flank the shores of the Niger Delta are cut off, without roads or electricity. Shell operates here with few outside witnesses. With hundreds of wells, most villages have Shell's gas flares somewhere nearby. Environmentalists say they cause acid rain and dry out crops. This is the town of Otuegwe. Surrounded by malnourished children, they tell stories of oil spills and declining yields. Ijaw villagers rely on fishing and agriculture for their food. A crop-destroying oil spill can travel far in the rainy season. This spill has been here for nearly 6 months.
I went to Shell and reported. So since then, this oil just spread all over, and you know, that time it was during flood period. So the water covered the whole area, and from these areas, the water carries the oil to very close to our community. Then many crops were destroyed. We were having nothing to feed on.
Nigeria is one of the poorest countries in the world, but it's the 6th largest oil producer. The Delta people demand Shell pays fair recompense for the damage caused by spills. In August 1998, near Nun River Flow Station, a massive spill occurred.
Since the place is polluted, there's no way that they will put trap inside again. Remove it down, remove it down.
This is the only place we are killing fish, and they have spoiled the place. There's no way for us to kill fish again.
Until this oil came, we survived on fishing. Oil is damaged everywhere, all around. We used to catch plenty. Now all you see is oil. There's no fish in this basket. Our clothes are stained with oil. For this community, the spill at Nun River is a calamity. It means their lives will be uprooted and they'll have to settle a new fishing ground.
To us, land is not just some property, some factor of production to be exploited and wasted. To us, land is more than that. It has some spiritual significance. It is where our gods are supposed to reside.
6 months later, at the Nun River spill, the water is gone, but the oil still covers the ground.
Shell has done nothing. For some time, we have made a series of outcry to the company, but nothing has been done. They say there is no operations here, so they are now coming to investigate the spill.
In Shell's Port Harcourt headquarters, the head of PR is an Ijaw. Bobby Brown accuses the villagers of engineering spills in order to claim compensation.
We've had cases where we've gone into communities, we've inspected the spillage site, identified that the cause was sabotage, fully signed the documents, members of the investigation team, which includes members of the community, by the way, endorsed that this was a sabotage spill.
To find the source of this leak, Shell had to excavate 10 feet down. They say most spills are caused by sabotage from local communities. And when they unearthed this damaged pipe, the investigators claimed it too was sabotage in order to claim compensation.
We are beginning to see now the compensation culture syndrome, where people want to earn money without working for it, where people want easy cash, where people are anxious to deny authority because it is their best way of getting their own.
In the mangrove swamps of the Delta, it's claim and counterclaim. Shell must be asking itself where the friction came from. The Ijaw point to the tactics Shell has used to keep communities at loggerheads with each other. Saturday used to work for Shell. He was paid to organize dissenting mobs to suppress protest.
I was close to the head of public and government affairs, which by name is Stephen Lawson-Jack. He called me and informed me that I should assist Shell Company to protect the oil facilities in my community, which is Kedera here. He gave me an assistance of 10,000 naira to mobilize on youth, which I did. The level of poverty here, level of unemployment, it makes everybody vulnerable to temptation.
Rural communities accuse Shell of securing their land contracts by any means.
What Shell and other oil companies do is to approach one or two rulers, particularly recognized chiefs, to cause a division among the chiefs, to whittle down or make incoherent the demands that ought to be made by the community.
The Ijaws say their own grinding poverty against vast oil profits can't be right. The town of Oporoma is only accessible by water. It's surrounded by oil installations. Shell has built a walkway through the village, but the people of Oporoma aren't satisfied. The king of Oporoma is determined that his village should be getting more. And Oporoma's youths are putting pressure on him to get tough with Shell.
All right, if we are producing 45,000 barrels of oil daily from Oporoma, now give us 1/3 of the, since you are not you are ready to develop the place, give us 1/3 of what you are producing so that we can sell it in the open market ourselves.
On December the 30th, the Delta exploded. The patience of the Ijaw youths snapped. Thousands came onto the streets demanding Shell close down. 5 were shot dead in Yenagoa town. Many others were beaten and locked up without any hope of a trial.
We marched through the places. They shot those they are supposed to shoot. Some they couldn't shoot down. Others, eventually people scattered. But with the same idea of frustrating the government intention to continuously degrade our environment.
Since December, everything has changed in the Delta. Ijaw youths now drive 4x4s looted from Shell. The Nigerian authorities only come to the town of Bamadi in force. Otherwise, it's ruled by the angry young men. It's become something of a political headquarters for the Ijaw youth movement.
Airports beg the Nigerian military because there is no democracy in the country. What we have now is military people suppressing the people every day. So we are appealing to them, appealing to everybody who is well-meaning, to speak to the federal government, which is now military controlled, to leave our people alone.
The Nun River flow station has closed. It's one of many which has been forced out of operation, their staff chased away by furious communities. There are no guns, but the atmosphere is tense. As a result of these closures, Shell has lost 1/3 of its production. The youths have also seized boats and helicopters.
The reason for the close down is because the villages nearby were annoyed and seized a lot of vessels belonging to SPDC. So Shell withdraw our staffs.
Youthful exuberance is also a factor that we observed from the actions of the youths. They have no patience. So they feel, since we wrote them one letter, they have not replied, the second, the third, and so on. Are these people, what are they doing? Since they don't want to respect even our chiefs, let's now kick them.
The villagers are demanding that Shell renegotiate its whole deal. The Kaiama Declaration demanded every Shell site close down and stop working. Felix Tuodolo is on the run. He signed the Kaiama Declaration and led assaults on flow stations.
We loaded 4 flying boats, speedboats, to go down there. And on reaching there, unfortunately, just as it's being done everywhere, now, the oil company invites the military to come and guide and protect all flow stations and their facilities.
In the hospitals and back rooms of the Delta languish scores of gunfire-wounded youths. Around the country, the army and the people have squared off from each other. Felix warns the oil companies the youth's ultimatum still stands. In the rainforests nearby, there are rumours of 1,000 armed Ijaw in military training.
The oil money is blood money. And if they will continue to kill us so that oil will flow, let them keep killing us. We will keep going down to those flow stations en masse and let them keep killing us. We know we will succeed to close down those flow stations. They can't kill all of us.
But Felix is struggling to control his fledgling movement. The young men are impatient and often lash out. In this town, a day later, 2 journalists were taken hostage by an angry mob of Ijaw youths. Hostage-taking is endemic. The oil companies have paid large ransoms, and now every foreigner has a price.
They were in front of the car, then they jumped off our car. There were 3 guys with machetes. They hit on the front window, on the windshield, on top of the car, so then they really got berserk. Everything what is white in their mind is from Shell, and Shell is white. And they hate the Shell people.
After an outcry over links with Nigeria's forces, the company denies it now calls in the army. But in January, that didn't stop 11 protesters being shot dead at Shell's Focados terminal.
They all come dancing, having leaves on the head, and dancing. You have man, woman, kids at the back. It was not too serious, but it could have been serious because they had broken bottles of coke.
To the people of the Delta, the oil rigs contain vast wealth. For Shell, the dilemma is just how far they can go to protect it.
Whatever you bring the military or navy all around, and you bring a fence, but it's not. It's not. I don't think it's really suitable at the moment, and you are not working in a very confident environment where it's like that.
The increase in tension in the Niger Delta is serious. How would I characterize it? Serious, yes. That would be one way to look at it. Serious in terms of its implications, serious in terms of the way we as a company regard it.
Shell says it now puts in $36 million into community programs each year. Like this, the Awaza Hospital. It's one of 6 sponsored by Shell. But critics say such programs are often ill-judged. Doctors here said only the antenatal classes are thriving. The hospital hasn't had water and electricity for 3 years. The cupboards stand empty. And there are no patients in the wards. In the Delta, Shell is being asked to be much more than an oil producer. It's always been known as a troubled region, but now the widespread ill will has reached a peak. In the complex waterways, politicians and activists have a ready audience.
Our culture is being ruined by the recklessness of a multinational. I lived in England, right? I schooled there, and I've been to Holland, and I've seen the way the Shell operate there. The way they operate in Nigeria is environmental racism.
Like they used to say,
Shell doesn't like to discuss government corruption, but in private meetings with their executives, they do blame the government for the shortage of cash in the Delta.
We have a problem in Nigeria in the sense that you have to be very careful what you say. We have a government who is a partner. Now, if we were supposed to, if we, for example, took up the first page of a newspaper and said Shell pays tax and government is chopping the money, we'll probably have our license revoked.
I call upon the Ogoni people, the peoples of the Niger Delta, and the oppressed ethnic minorities of Nigeria to stand up now and fight fearlessly and peacefully for their rights. History is on their side.
The Ogoni struggle has now travelled to other tribes. Shell and the other oil companies face a crisis which is far from diffused.